Welcome back to another episode of PedalBox, and if you're fed up of us working on wiring, don't worry, you're in good company. We're fed up of working on wiring too, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can get notified when we're working on something else instead. That's right, today we've got yet more wiring ahead of us, and the goal for now is to get the fans working, delete this fan controller, and button up all the wiring at the front of the car. If we get some more stuff done, that's a bonus. So one thing that we really want to do is get rid of this fan controller box. I can't remember exactly what goes on in here. It has a couple of overrides that come in from like the climate control system, some sensor wires that come off the coolant temperature sensor on the front, and a big output feed that runs the fans. But apparently they're quite prone to failure. So we're going to see if we can delete it, and that's going to mean bypassing some of the control leads for it and everything, and rewiring some of the stuff around the front of the car. A lot of the things that it does don't really matter anymore. We've obviously got rid of the air conditioning system and a few of the systems around that. So certainly a lot of this was kind of useless anyway, but if we can get rid of it completely, all the better. Simple is, after all, good. There's a couple of things that we know this box does besides brake, or at least there's a few things we think it does anyway. One is it takes a sense wire from the coolant temperature sensor on the radiator and uses that to trigger the high-speed mode on the fans. Interestingly, the coolant temperature sensor itself directly powers the low-speed wire on the fans. So we've got big power comes in here, runs out to high speed on the fans based on a sense wire from the sensor, while the sensor also gets power and triggers the low speed on the fans. Few other bypasses it has. We've got, there's some wires that come in from the aircon system, and basically whenever you've got the air conditioning on, it forces the fans on so that it can cool the condenser. Of course, we don't have that anymore, so we don't need that. And there's probably a whole bunch of other stuff that we're not so sure about. But in any case, it's kind of a liability, so we are going to get rid of it. The catch is, because it's responsible for the high power feed on the fans, we do have to do that ourselves some other way. Low speed, as I said, is already handled by the sensor itself, so that's nice and easy. But for the high speed, or high power rather, we're going to have to run like a relay inside the car that we're just going to switch on manually whenever we see the temperature get quite high. Should be pretty rare, because when we're wide open throttle, we should be moving and have lots of air over the radiator anyway. And hopefully when we're parked up, the low speed should take care of it. But just in case, we're going to make sure we've got that high speed available. Maybe if we're stuck in traffic, driving it to a track or something like that, might be handy to have. Now, since the fans have been out here barely protected, they've only really had the bonnet over them to protect them from the elements. They will have got wet, and they've probably got quite a bit of iron filings from when we've been, cutting and sanding everything else in them. So there is a small chance, as much as I don't want to admit it, there is a small chance they might be shorted or damaged or seized or something. So we're going to do a couple of quick tests and make sure they work. To start off, I've got a little battery pack here that I actually made for an RC plane, but it's about the right voltage for what we're doing. It runs at about 12 volts when it's fully charged, which is pretty much perfect. Just checking I haven't flattened it, and yeah, we've got 12 volts in there. That's quite happy. And we've got some dead tails off one of the wiring looms from one of the many cars we've disassembled here. This could be off either the A3 or the TT. We've just mated that up to the fan connector, and we're just going to feed this into the battery, make sure both fans spin up. So there's two wires here, one for each fan. So just going to test one, plug it in the other one, test them both. So just pop that in there. For anyone wondering, this is not how you're meant to use XT60 connectors. So that's one fan working on high speed. Test the low speed as well, make sure that's happy. Actually sounds just about as fast as the high speed, but definitely working. So that fan seems fine. We'll pop our connector out. It is a bit chewy with all the dust that's gotten in it, but it does come off. And I'll now pop him on there. And we'll do the same thing with the fan that's nearer me. So we'll take the high power connector, pop him in there. I think this one's running a little bit faster. That leaf scared me more than it should have. Sounded a bit like an arc, but that's all right. And low speed. A little bit more sedate as you'd expect, but definitely working. So the fans seem pretty happy. There is a bit of a squeak coming out the driver's side one, but it does definitely still turn, still blows a fair bit of air. That all seems fine. So we can say the fans are good. So as long as we can get power into them, that's all happy. Moving back into the car, these are the two connectors that once powered the original fans. Now, they're not quite useful to us because we swapped out one of the fans, and Audi had the bright idea of putting different connectors on each so that you can't plug them in the wrong way around. We've got two identical connectors on the fans, and you can see these are not identical to each other here. So we've got to swap this female connector for a male one so that we can make both actually plug in. Not too hard, not a big deal. We've got all the spare parts that we need inside. In fact, actually, we've got the test connector that I was using just a minute ago. So we have to replace this with that, and then we'll be all good. A couple other things we have to do as well. This is the big power connector that ran into that fan controller block. This is what kind of drove everything. Obviously this has to go because we've got rid of the block, and we'll probably bypass a few bits and pieces. And I think this one here is what goes into the coolant temperature sensor. So this is actually basically what drives the low speed. Well, that was dumb.
What did you do?
Cut it real close to the join on here.
It's fine. Did you just cut the wrong one?
Oh my God. Heat gun. Oh, yeah, am I right? Cool, that seems done. So that's all the connectors sorted, and one lesson relearned. I've reminded myself a few times in the past, yet I forgot. I burnt myself on the hot air gun once again. So I've got a nice bit of burn gel on there, and hopefully that'll be fine. But the good news is, these are both good to go. So in my hand here, I've got the 4 leads that we've removed from the connector that once powered our fan controller. Now we're trying to simplify things where we can, partly so there's fewer wires in here for us to get confused about, and partly to try and save a few grams where we can. This car is pretty heavy, and as much as we've spent a lot of weight budget on solid steel panels, it'd be nice to get a little bit back where we can. So first off, we're going to remove this ground. That can go away. We've actually got another ground here that's of the same size, has just the same current carrying capacity. And in case you're wondering, but Chris, wouldn't it be bad to shove 2 grounds worth of current down one? They actually both join together into another cable the same size right down there. So it's not really going to have any difference on anything. Next one that we're going to remove is this red one here, which runs all the way back to the battery. This is a second permanent 12-volt feed that I would guess probably powered the electronics in here, while the big cable probably just ran into like an internal relay or a FET or something to drive the fans. But because we don't have that anymore, we're just going to take a tap off of the other cable here, the third power line. This is another unswitched power feed, goes all the way back to the battery, runs onto one of the fusible links on here, and this one is just going to be teed off to do everything we need in the front. And finally, the 4th lead is this one, which is the high power fan output from the controller, which we've spliced onto our 2 fan connectors here. So the red and white connector we're going to hang on to. We're going to tee it off 2 ways. One way is going to go to the sensor, which I think is on this connector here, and it's going to switch on the low side of the fan. And the other way it goes is into a relay that we're going to control from in the cockpit as a kind of oh crap disaster mode if we see the coolant temperature going too high to force them onto high speed. So yeah, quite a few less wires than we started out with here. So we just spent a few hours tidying all the cabling up here. We've got loom tape around most of it. We've set it all around where it needs to go and shortened a whole bunch of stuff. This is looking really, really neat in the front here. That means we can start moving on to sort of closing everything in a bit more. And that means taking our radiator shroud that we made a while ago and putting it back on. Now, one thing we knew that we'd have to do is punch some holes to get the fan connectors through. One thing we might have forgotten about, though, is that when we put our inner arch covers on here, they get in the way of where these flanges went down the side of the front structure to bolt on from the outside. So when I go to try and put this in place now, we will see it can't sit down as it's supposed to because the edges are supposed to drop through where the inner arches are. So we're going to have to take those flanges, bend them up, and screw it down onto the structure there. is nearly in. We just need to knock a little bit out the back corners where it now interferes with the new panels, but mostly we're pretty good now. We've knocked a hole out for our fan power connectors to come through, put some rubber on it so that we won't cut through the wires. So now we can reinstall it, and hopefully we can test run the fans. So we've got a little homemade battery back out, and we're going to do another test run with the fans now that they're all connected together through the wiring loom. This one's going to be a little bit more ghetto than the last one because we haven't got an earth that I can just access, so I'm going to just pop a little bit of earth wire in my battery connector and hold it to the aluminium of the inner wheel arch here. So I'm just going to hold that there with one hand. I'm going to take the high power fan connector in my other hand just here, and we'll see if this all turns on properly. I'm going to definitely get a bit of arcing here as I connect it, but that should be fine.
Got it?
Is that sticking on?
Oh yeah.
Awesome. And with that, I think we're done with our wiring at the front for now. There is still a bit more that we'd like to do in future. We've got to sort out the wiper power and the fuel pump, but that requires us getting a few adapters and cables and stuff sorted out that we can splice in. So for now, we're pretty much done up here. Great success. Now, if you want to help us in our future efforts, I'm not sure what we're going to do next, but whatever it is, it's probably going to cost us a couple of quid. So if you want to help out with that, jump on patreon.com/PedalBox show. You can support us there from anything as little as $1 a month. Every dollar, every pound that goes into that does go into the builds here. It really, really helps us out keeping things like just really stupid stuff a lot of the time, like consumables, welding, gas, because that's a big sting when it hits that sort of stuff in stock. You can also jump on our store at shop.pedalbox.show where you can buy the swanky merch that, as usual, I am not wearing. Although I do have a PedalBox mug, fire in the background over there full of tea. And as always, remember to like the video if you liked it, comment down below if you didn't. We're always looking for more advice and ways we can improve. We've taken on a fair bit of advice recently with regard to our braking system and the handbrake and everything. So a lot of our viewers' comments are really, really appreciated. And of course, it always helps us get more visibility, which is great. So thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next time.